Hey everybody, this is Dustin Puryear with my office hours for Autotask. And I'm starting a little bit late this morning. Was having some severe issues with my webcam. Hopefully it's all working. I should be sharing my screen. So I wanted to tackle a problem today in Autotask. I saw it on a forum somewhere, and I think it's really good. They were asking how you can modify your billing rate in different situations for different customers based on the work type being done or the role. And I will say that Autotask absolutely lets you do this. And it can be actually very sophisticated how you set this up. But a lot of people just really aren't sure how this works out of the very kind of basic recurring service contract. So I wanted to go through that. So again, Dustin Puryear, weekly office hours for Autotask. And we're going to be talking about how to modify your billing rates based on the customer and the contract and the situation for the technician. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to come up with the scenario. Let's see here. We're just going to open up a random ticket. And what ultimately we're going to be doing here is creating a a specific type of recurring service contract with a configuration that accommodates this. So let's think through a scenario. I'm a technician and I need to build something, right? And so, preferably, by the way, you don't have your technician scrolling up and down here. They would just choose this is an on-site or remote from the speed code, and it would set it up for them. But we're going to customize this a little bit here just so we can see. Let's say that I want my own IT on-site billing rate to be double my remote support, or maybe it's just billed, whereas my remote support is not billed. How would we handle that? And so what we're going to do here is we're going to look at, there's no contract here, but let's go take a look for this customer Blue Sky group. And we're going to pop them open and let's go create a recurring service contract for them. And let's see what that would look like. So I'm going to say new recurring service. And this is my Blue MSP. That's what we're going to call this. That's our contract. And start date would be, let's just say the first. Let me move this out of the way. And then let's just say we're going to let this roll for 12 months. Yes to default, my default. And so we're going to click next. Now, one thing I have found, particularly when you start a contract, a recurring service contract, um, in the middle of the month, is you don't actually want to define this here because the proration won't work properly. And we're going to come back to this because this is actually the answer to this question. And what we want to do here is, well, open the contract so we can look at it. And we want to include our service. This is how we're going to build them. And let's see what we got here. And let's just say that was our IT desktop support. I didn't really pre-configure this. And now whenever they bill for anything under this contract, oh, I need to edit this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this ticket on that contract. And now whenever we bill for anything on this contract, it's gonna fall under that recurring service. And that might not, well, often that's not what we want, right? Um, we want some things to be billed differently. So look, I'm gonna create a time entry and I'm gonna say this is on-site support. Now, what would happen here is that this would fall under that billing rate. So let's say that it's 15 minutes. And now we have an activity for this amount of time. The problem here is what happens when we don't want on-site support covered. Maybe your MSP contract is only for remote support. And so what we would do is we would create an exclusion, and I'm going to show you how to make this super easy going forward. And we would say, hey, look, I don't want on-site support, on-site support billable. Now, some people do argue, well, why do you need to do this if the technician could just choose non-billable? Well, I think that's a horrible idea. And the reason I think it's a horrible idea is you don't want your technicians having to memorize every billing code. I just disagree with that fundamentally. Um, why are we asking our technicians to figure out every single time something should be billed or not billed? They should be focused on resolving tickets. Now, obviously, when we hand them work, we want to know if it's billable or not billable. Um, and that can include from a dispatcher or from how the contract is configured, which is what we're doing now. And so what's going to happen here is now we're going to exclude this work type. Now, there's a couple of gotchas to what I just did. Is okay, now whenever I add an on-site, IT on-site billable here, it will actually bill them and not be covered, right? But we have a second issue. What happens if we want to bill these at separate prices? Maybe one customer, we're going to bill them for on-site support at 150, and another customer, we're going to bill them at $500. How would you handle that? So again, we can force a technician to memorize a million different roles. So they pick the $200 versus the 150 versus the 125. I think that's just a horrible idea. And so what we would do there is we would create what is called an exclusion contract. The exclusion contract is used in a recurring service contract to dictate blue MSP exclusion contract. And I would name it something obvious, that or time materials. And let's go ahead and start it for the first, and we will finish it 9/30/2025. Now, what's important here is notice, we'll get to that in a second, actually. So now we have an exclusion contract, right? And so now we can do separate rates. So now we can modify only for this contract the bill rates of certain roles, right? So we could say, hey, look, if you're going to be on site, um, and I don't have that set up in here, but let's say that we had an IT on site role. Actually, I want to bill that at 125 or $200, and that's okay. And so what we're going to do now is we need the hours to flow from this exclusion into this contract. So I would say I want all my exclusions to flow to this puppy right here. Now anything excluded here will flow here, and now we've set our current our custom bill rate at 200 for this made up role. Now what's going to be common is if you're properly doing your recurring service contracts, you're going to be doing exclusions all the time. For example, you might have a project look, project labor. Maybe you always exclude project labor. And so instead of having to memorize and go modify that everywhere, really what we want to do is we want to create an exclusion set that you import and that manages all of this. So exclusion. So what I want to say is blue MSP remote only exclusions. In other words, if I have a remote only contract for this MSP service agreement, I always want to exclude this, and this. And now for all my contracts, instead of doing this custom work, instead of having to remember what custom settings I had for everything, I would just use a preset package. This is then I'm going into this knowing this contract I just sold is only for remote support. Therefore, I'm going to use these exclusions. And notice it doesn't add them here, it adds them here. And that lets me go and change that exclusion set in the future to exclude or include certain things without modifying my 4,000 contracts. And so now we've shown you how you can handle or you can charge labor against a recurring service contract by sending it to an exclusion, and how to properly scale out the configuration of these exclusions via exclusion sets. And hopefully this wraps it all up in a nice bow for you. I hope this was helpful. And again, Dustin Puryear, Giant Rocket Ship, and this is my office hours for Autotask. We'll see you at the next one.